Okay, this video is going to go over the Revit commercial space project. So before we start, I'm just going to look at a couple of the different files that we're being provided. One of them is we are getting a template file, which that'll be the last thing we look at because that'll be jumping into the project itself. So I'm just going to look at some of these PDFs first. I'm actually going to look at the commercial spaces 2 before I look at commercial spaces 1, just so we can understand a little bit about the building and how it's coming together. And so this is just showing us the building as an isometric. It's not actually describing necessarily anything of how it's constructed or what it looks like, but just to give you an idea of this is what our foundation is going to look like. We have a basic rectangle, a little stairwell, and then some concrete pads, which are holding up some columns if we're looking then at the first floor. Within the first floor, again, we have our kind of basic rectangle, a few windows placed, and as well as a couple of curtain walls and some doors within some of those curtain walls. And then our stairwell, a little bathroom space, but there's a ceiling above it, so we can't really see in there at the moment. Then onto our second floor, which is going to have this little loft area that's open down to below. So we have a little knee wall and some floor space, and again, a couple of windows placed around, an additional bathroom space here. And then to look at the building as on the roof. So the stairs do lead up into the roof. We have a flat style roof, which we're going to actually design as a floor instead of a roof. And we are going to ignore the fact that, yes, technically it should be sloped or pitching in towards a drain, but for the sake of our drawing, we won't do any of that. And then a little utility room that's accessible on the roof, and then kind of what our final design or our final project is going to look like. We're also going to make some custom components here for these little shaders that are going on these two areas of the doors. And so that's just to give you an idea of what the final product is going to look like. These drawings are going to be helpful for you while you are working through the project, but they're not going to be the end all be all because there are no dimensions at all included in here. It's just kind of giving you those visual cues, particularly of like which materials to use and things like that. If we go look at commercial spaces 1, this is going to be what your final sheets are going to look like when you go to submit your work. So you're going to submit your work as an RVT, the Revit project or the Revit model, as well as then a printed copy of it as a PDF. So this is our cover sheet. We just have 3 renderings of the building. One as a true style rendering in which it has the textures and the materials applied, and we have a sky in the background. Then we have a hidden line style rendering or just a black and white one, which helps really define the form and understand it. And then we have a wireframe rendering as well. We're zoomed 26% in, so it looks a little weird, particularly the wireframe is going to look weird sort of regardless, but if we actually had it at full size that it would show up on an ArcD sheet, it is somewhat comprehensible. Then we also have our foundation plan. There is a grid that's set up in here, and that grid is going to be provided within the template file. And so that's going to be where we put the majority of our measurements and everything from. We have a framing plan for our second story. So since that second level is that loft space, we are going to need to have some beams set up in order to hold that loft space up. And so that is what is going on here. And we will place some of those as well. Then we have our floor plan for our level 1. So if I just zoom in a little bit, we have a fairly simplistic building going on here in which it is just this rectangle. Our floor plan is also then letting us know where we're going to place all of our windows. But we're going to do a lot of the work based off of the grid. But if we need information about where some doors are going to be placed, how far out this is going to be coming out, things like that, we can get all of that from our floor plan. We also have our second story floor plan, which is only going to be this loft space because this is open to below. And then we have a knee wall. sitting here. Again, we're getting some information about where all of our different windows are going to be placed, and even so far as to how far out from this grid the knee wall's placed. Grids are really helpful for when placing dimensions because especially when you're doing something like a masonry project like this, building off of a grid is particularly helpful. We have our roof plan, or our third story, in which we're just able to see our roof, where that utility room is. There's no measurements given particularly for these doors on here, but what we can infer is that we are following the same pattern from our level 2 as well as our level 1. So we're just going to borrow some of those measurements on level 3. Then we have some elevations as well, which are just giving us some information related to our different heights. If I zoom in a little bit, that hatch will get easier to bear. So it's just giving information related to our materials and our heights of our building, of where we need to have walls either stopping or starting. And then we also have one stylized elevation in which we have shadows turned on. So you can see there's a big difference between looking at the building just in a flat elevation and looking at the building with shadows. Shadows can be particularly helpful to show depth because the way this curtain wall is placed and the way this one is placed are pretty much the same. In fact, this one actually is more so like this, since it's going to have that custom component of that shader sticking out. And we aren't necessarily able to see that when we're looking at it completely flat orthographically. So shadows can really help show those variations in depth. We have 4 building sections. 2 of the section cuts are going to be provided within your template file, and then 2 of them we are going to have to place. So we have an east-west section cut that is just cutting through the building and showing us all of these structural components of those beams holding up the loft space as well as then the roof, and we can see them then in this cut as well from the side, and we're able to see the stairwell. And then we have 2 section cuts describing outside of necessarily that structural space or in front of those structural beams, so we're able to see that knee wall. And then within this one we are not cutting through the stairwell, and we have some information related to the materials and also some heights. So one thing within this project is some of the heights and some of the measurements, since I've drawn this before, I just kind of remember or know, but all of the information can be found from these plans. So when we go to do something like this partial knee wall, we can see here in this section for how far down that base offset is and how far up that top offset is. So then we can draw something like that wall in. And then we also have 2 wall sections in here. One of them as a sort of plain, I guess we can call it, building cut, just to get information about the building itself, and then one as a much more detailed wall section. I'm going to separate this building also into a couple of different videos focusing on different areas. So my intention with today is just to get the building itself laid out, the windows, the doors, and then in another video we can focus on those structural pieces and some of the smaller details, the annotations, and then within a separate video do the wall section. Because while this does seem like a big project to tackle within this view, and we can even zoom in a little bit to see it in a heck of a lot more detail, Revit does take care of some of this work for us, and then we're also going to arc back sort of to an AutoCAD style drawing where we are just putting lines in manually or detailing lines in manually. So it can be done. It takes a little time, but it can be done, and we'll do it all in a series of videos. How many? Not sure just yet. So first thing I'm going to do before I start my project then is to download this template. So I'm just going to click on the template file. I'm going to just download it. Now, from what I've found, if we actually click on this to open it up, it's going to open up as a template. not as a new project. So we actually don't want to do that. What we want to do instead is open up Revit, whether that's you going to your desktop or searching for it. I already have Revit open here. So we're just going to open Revit, and from our home page, we're actually going to say that we want to create a new model. So I'm going to click on New, and then I'm going to click on Browse. And instead of looking in where Revit has some of these template files, I'm going to go into my Downloads folder. So I'm going to click on the Look In. For me, I need to go click on my name and then double click on Downloads, and I have this template file. We can see in the preview then too that we've got that grid space and area already set up for us. So I'm going to open this up. It may take a few seconds or so to open it, particularly for me, it's got to update to 2024 to do it. And then it's placed me into my level 0, which would be my foundation floor plan. And we can see already these here are those section cuts that are being provided for you in your drawing. We also have this grid already established within here. I've placed this grid using the grid option here, or keyboard shortcut GR. Grids, as I mentioned before, are particularly helpful. And there's also been a couple of things adjusted within this template for the visibility and graphics to make it a little bit easier to draw and work with. Then within the template too, if I just scroll down to my sheets in my project browser, there's a paper space sheet already set up for us for an ArcD project. And we have some stuff set up in the title block where we can adjust it and move it as we may need. The first thing I'm going to do before I start is just save this onto a flash drive so that way I have my copy. So I'm going to click up here on Save, or keyboard shortcut Control S. And then I recommend you save in and you go find your USB drive. Since this is my laptop, I'm going to put mine in my folder that I have. So I'm going to go into Class Files, my BSC 1210 folder. And then I'm going to name this BSC 1210, my last name, all caps, my first name, lowercase, and then dash commercial. So this way I have mine backed up. And make sure you're saving it as an RBT, and then we can save. And now all of our backups will go there, and we'll always have our work kind of saved to it. So before we jump into drawing the building, I'm going to go into my level 1 floor plan. So I'm just going to double click on level 1 here. And if we look at our file for the drawings we've been provided, if I scroll up to level 1 and I zoom in, one thing of note is that all of our measurements or our wall placements is coming from the inside of the core. So we are measuring things just based off of this grid. These grids are 20-foot spaced, and they've already been spaced that way for you. But we can see here that the inside of the core of this wall is what we're basing that off of. So one thing to keep in mind when we go to place our walls and where we want them to go. Let me zoom out again, and then I'll go into Revit and we'll start doing some walls. So I'm going to go into the wall tool, which again is up here, or keyboard shortcut WA. And we can see that there is this wall here called P01. This is already a custom wall that's been built out for us in this project. All of these ones labeled P01 are the walls that you are going to be using, and they have all been set up for you, depending on just where we want them placed. So for the bulk of our building, we are going to use the gray brick on CMU. So I'm going to switch over into that one. And then if we just go into edit type and look at its structure, it's been built out already to have that gray brick on the outside, a air barrier, then we have 1 inch of insulation, we have our membrane. Keep in mind, if something has a function of a membrane, like our vapor barrier, it has to be set at 0. It cannot be shown with a thickness. Then we have our structure of our CMUs. we have some metal furring, and then we have our gypsum wallboard or our drywall sitting on the inside. So all of our layers have already been defined for us. So I'm just going to click on OK to get out of here. And what we need to pay attention to when we go to place our walls are our heights and our location line. If we go look into our top constraint levels, there are several levels placed in here, and there's a level 4 and a level 5 that we didn't see in our sheets. There was no level 4 or 5. And even when we go look at our elevations, there's only level 0, 1, 2, and 3. So level 4 is a level that has been created, but just no floor plan has been set up for where this height goes, because we're going to have a parapet coming up for our foundation wall here. If we look at it in a section, we can see it a bit better that these walls are going to extend a little bit higher than where the roof sits. And level 5 is where this stairwell is going to be sitting for our height. So just kind of keep that in mind. If we look at the building 3D, well, I actually have those hidden. So sorry. If I look at it 3D and I turn that little light bulb on, we can see where level 4 and level 5 is. So those are just reference heights, but they don't have floor plans associated with them. And this gray box is just our site. I'm going to go back into my level 1 plan, and now I'm going to start drawing my walls. So I did keyboard shortcut WA, or you could click on the wall tool. We want to use this exterior gray brick on CMU. Our base constraint is going to be level 1. Our top constraint for these walls is we want it to go up to level 4. And our location line has already been placed as core face interior. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click to start on this grid, and I'm just going to click and create a box just based off of that exterior grid. And so that's going to be the bulk of my leasable space. If I go look at the building 3D again by just clicking on this button, we already have a fair amount of our building kind of set up and ready to go for us, which is pretty cool. And then I'm going to go back into my level 1 plan, and I'm going to set up my stairwell, and I'm going to place kind of dimensions to adjust the stairwell after the fact. But I'm just going to eyeball it that the stairwell itself is sitting in between grid spaces 3 and 5. And if we go look at it within a floor plan, about how far out it comes. So I'm just going to eyeball it for the time being, and then I'm going to use the dimension tool to place some dimensions of where exactly that staircase is going to be. Because we can see then that, and if we zoom in, we can see from the grid to where that framing is 2 foot 3 1/4. We can see how long the entire thing is. And then we can also see how far out from the grid is that interior of the frame. Everything's going to be coming to the frame of the building. So that stairwell itself is made out of the red brick. So I'm going to go back into Revit. I'm going to go into the wall command again, which is WA. And I'm going to change my wall type to the exterior brick on metal stud, this P01. And I'm going to change my top constraint. My base constraint I'll leave at level 1. For my top constraint, I'm going to want this one to go up to level 5. And I'm just going to, for the time being, just place a box here. I don't have the right measurements yet, but I've at least then just added in my frame or my piece here. And now I'm going to go in with the dimension tool to lock some of these measurements into place for how far out pieces are going to go. So I remember, because it was the last one we looked at, that from this grid space to the frame here was 11 foot 1 1/4. And it's going to be kind of hard to click on just that frame bit here because of the fact of the line weights. So we can turn line weights off using the keyboard shortcut TL, which is thin lines. Thin lines makes it so that way nothing has any line weight, and now I can easily see that frame. Or there is a shortcut button up here. So I can use that shortcut button to turn it on and off. I often work a lot in thin lines and then just turn them back off once I'm done with the project. But please make sure that you put line weights back on before you put something onto a sheet. So in order to adjust this up, I'm going to use the dimension tool, which is keyboard shortcut DI, or if I hit escape to end it, it is this shortcut right here. So I'm going to go DI, and I'm going to make a dimension from this grid line to this piece of frame. Since it doesn't want to go to that piece of frame, I'm just going to hover over it, and I'm going to use my tab key. So I'm just hitting tab until I shuffle through, find the one I want, and then I'm going to click again, and I'm just going to move out to place this dimension. Now that I have this dimension placed, I'm going to hit escape a bunch of times to end the command, and now I can click on this wall, and I can adjust this to be the number I want, which is 11 foot, 1 1/4. And I can hit enter. Once I have that placed exactly how I want it to, a smart thing to do would be to hit escape again, click on this dimension, and lock it. So this way, if I'm moving stuff around later on within my project, this is locked into place, and this has to be that 11 foot, 1 1/4. For my next dimension, we have then from face of or outside of frame. Let's just zoom in to make sure we're going. So we have from the face of frame to this grid line is 2 3/4, and that the overall from outside of frame to outside of frame is 34 feet, 10 3/4. So let's try to keep those two measurements in our head the entire time. So I'm going to go back into the dimension tool, which is DI. Again, I want to go from the face of the frame to face of frame. So I'm just going to hover over it and hit tab until I get the one I want, and then click. And then I can click to place it. Once I have it placed, I'll hit escape a bunch of times. I'll click on either one of these two walls, and then I can click on this and change it to 34 feet, 10 3/4. Keep in mind you don't have to put any markers for foot, feet, or inches. And then I'll hit escape a bunch of times. I'll click on this dimension, and I'm going to lock that dimension into place. And then I'm going to go back into the dimension tool, DI. I'm going to again hit tab until I can click on the one I want, to the grid. I'm going to kind of lock it so that way it's in line here. Click to place that one. And then I can hit escape, click on this wall, click on the measurement to space 0.75, enter. And then I'll hit escape, click on the dimension, and lock it. Since this dimension is a little too large to fit comfortably in this space too, we can also click on this grip and just drag the text off of it, so that way it is just not sitting there kind of uncomfortably. So now I have that stairwell placed where I want it to go. If I go into my level 2 plan, we also have then the bulk of our drawing already ready to go in level 2. Same thing with level 3. We already have the bulk of our drawing. Our detail level has been turned down, so that way we can't necessarily see all of these details in our walls. And then if I go look at the building 3-dimensionally, we have a fair amount of our building ready to go. What we are missing now is this wall here. So if we go look at our drawings, we have just on level 3, we have a brick wall sitting right on top of here. And if we go look at it in a section cut, we can see it a little bit more so too. So we do need to add a brick wall that goes from level 3 as its base up to level 5. And so I'm going to go into my level 3 floor plan. I'm going to draw a wall, which is keyboard shortcut WA. I'm going to use this brick wall, this P01 brick on metal stud, and I'm going to go from here to here, which I also realized I didn't change my base constraint. If I go look at it, or my top constraint, but that's okay. This warning that I'm saying that highlighted walls overlap is fine. It's going to happen, but we can easily fix it. If I go look at it 3-dimensionally, I made a bunch of mistakes too, because we can look here at this wall. It's sitting in here. We have it set at the core face interior, and I drew it inside out. So my base constraint was level 3. My top constraint went up to level 4. So it's just this tiny little wall here. I can easily switch that to level 5. So that way it's not at least a tiny little wall. My problem for the time right now is that my wall is inside out. And that's because of something sort of weird that Revit does. Revit wants you to draw in a clockwise motion, but often we're going to forget to do something like that. And so my brick is sitting on the inside. Easy fix is I can click on this wall and I can use the space bar to just flip it around. It's still not placed to kind of exactly where I want it to go though. So I could use my arrow keys to kind of move it in and out, but that's also going to be really tricky to get it exactly in line. So better option is to use the align tool, which is keyboard shortcut AL, or this button here, where I can say, I want this wall to act as my alignment to this wall. And what it's going to do is bring that brick wall out. So that way it's sitting nice and flush with the parapet wall that we kind of have going up from here. This kind of weird overlapping is really ugly though, and we sort of don't want that in our final product. And so we can easily modify that with, if you're not in the modify tab by default, you can click here, or even then if you're in architecture, you can click on modify and you can click on the wall you want, is we're going to use the cut tool to cut this part of the wall out of this piece. So that way they don't have that weird overlap. So to do that, I'm going to use cut. Cut doesn't have a keyboard shortcut. You can make a custom one. So I have CC as my custom keyboard shortcut for cutting. I replaced the copy one, but you don't have to do that. You could just come up here to click on cut. You click on the piece you want to keep and the thing you want to cut out of it. And what it did, if I hit escape a bunch of times now, is it adjusted this wall so that way they are just not overlapping. It's another thing I'm going to do when I go to put in these curtain walls here, is there's kind of 2 ways we can approach those curtain walls in those areas. Okay. So with that, we've got a big bulk of our building done and ready to go, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to go back into my level 1 floor plan and I'm going to start placing in my curtain walls first, and then kind of my doors and my windows. So our curtain walls, if we go look at some views that we can see them. All right, we can see it in this section view here that the curtain wall is going from level 1 with a top constraint of level 2. We can understand them a little bit better here in this elevation though. So we can see that they have a grid where we are 8 foot high and then another 8 foot high. Then this side is 4 foot by 10 foot, and they all follow that same grid pattern. So they're all going to be split into a 4 foot, 10 foot space with an 8 foot high. This one, we're going to replace this panel to a door, and we're also going to replace this panel to a door. And where they are placed, we can see in our level 1 floor plan if I scroll up. So we have some measurements of how far over, and then including how far wide they are. So each one is 14 feet wide and placed 3 foot off that grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a curtain wall. So that is going to start the wall tool. You can click on the button in the top or WA. And I'm going to change my wall type to this P01 curtain wall. I have a base constraint of level 1. I have a top constraint. It's already set to level 2, which is great because that way I could just use it. And I'm going to just place one here that is 14 feet wide. So I'm going to do 14, enter, and I'm going to get this error code saying that they overlap, but that's okay because what I'm going to do is that cut function. So I just hit escape to end the curtain wall. I only hit escape once. And then I'm going to come to cut geometry. I'm going to click on this wall and I'm going to click on the curtain wall. And that's going to just cut out this opening. Another way you could approach it is if you drew kind of these walls where I almost don't want to ruin my model here, but like if I only drew a little bit of wall here and then I came into curtain wall, I drew my 14-foot curtain wall, and then I drew my exterior gray CMU, which this is now even going to be inside out. I make this one 6 feet. So like I could go about sort of gridding this out and then make just one long CMU wall on the top from level 2 to level 5. But I feel like that's kind of a longer way to do that. So I'm going to Control Z to undo this and get my whole wall back here. What I'm curious of is if I cut this already and I go into level 1, if I now go place my dimension for 3 foot, this should shift over with it. So I'm hoping that stayed within the 2024 version. So I'm going to come up here to the dimension tool or keyboard shortcut DI, and I'm going to click on this grid, click on this edge, click to place the dimension, and then hit escape. And I want to click on this curtain wall. Now click on this dimension and do 3, enter, and it did look like the cut shifted with it, which is fantastic. I can also then, after I hit escape, click on this to lock it in place. You don't have to each time, but sometimes it's kind of helpful. So I'm going to do another curtain wall here for this kind of window pane, and then another curtain wall within here for this one, and another curtain wall over here as well. So I'm going to go into the wall tool, keyboard shortcut WA. I'm going to just place a curtain wall in here that's 14 foot, enter. I'm going to ignore this warning. I'm going to place another curtain wall here that is 14, enter. I'm going to ignore that warning. And I'm going to place another curtain wall here that is 14 foot. And if you guessed it, I'm going to ignore this warning. It's not saying we can't do it. It's just saying that's really weird. Why would you want a wall in a wall? Then I'm going to hit escape once to just get out of the curtain wall kind of chain. And I'm going to use the cut tool, which it went away. I'm going to use the cut tool. So I'm going to click on cut to click on the wall I want to keep, the curtain wall I want to cut out, the wall I want to keep, the curtain wall I want to cut out, keep, cut out. And so now I have my curtain walls placed. I need to adjust their dimensions. So I'm just going to do a big string of dimensions while I'm here. And I'm going to use this button here or keyboard shortcut DI. And I'm just going to say from this edge to this edge to this grid to this edge, this one to the grid. So since I'm going to have to place these afterwards, it just kind of makes sense to just get all of these in here at once. And while I have them here too, I'm going to lock these 14 ones in place. So that way, as I adjust some of these other measurements, I'll lock this 3 foot one in place too, since that is already what I want it to be. So as I adjust some of the measurements, it's going to move and adjust where these walls are to make sure that this is going to stay 14. This has to stay 3, things like that. So then I'll hit escape like several times afterwards. I'm going to click on this curtain wall and see it won't let me adjust this 14 because I have it locked. I could unlock it, but I'm not gonna. And I'm gonna say I want this to be 3, enter, and it adjusted this curtain wall to also make that one 3 because it had to make all of these parameters work. Click on this curtain wall, and I'll make this number here 3. That's 30, Dinah. And see too how I kind of, as I'm moving these or shifting these, some other things that are moving, when I change this one to 3, it changed this back to 3.6. So that's why locking ones in place can sometimes help. I'll hit escape, I'll lock that one, I'll lock this one, I'll lock this one. Seems actually now they all are set to the way I kind of want them to be, which is fantastic and wonderful. I might have to move these out a little more once I start putting in those concrete pads, but I won't worry about that just yet. And then we'll also place some dimensions for this one. While in our drawing, we don't have any dimensions that says how far out this is. I'm going to assume it's 3 foot from this grid and 14 foot wide. So I'm going to go into the dimension tool, grid to here, click to place it, and then hit escape. And I'm going to lock this 14 dimension in place. So that way when I click on this grid to move it, 3 foot, this is going to remain 14. So now if we look at it 3-dimensionally by just clicking on here and orbiting around, we have our grid set up, or rather our curtain wall set up. Now we're going to put a curtain grid in place to make our curtain walls into, if we look at them from an elevation, to give them those mullions in there. So we want to put one mullion in 4 foot on each of those, and then another one up 8 feet on each of them. So to put in our curtain grid, I'm going to hit escape a bunch of times and go into the architecture tab, and I'm going to use this option here to place in a curtain grid. Within our first project, we used a storefront, which already had a grid in place, but we can actually make our own custom grid. And all I'm going to do is, sorry about my phone, is I'm going to kind of zoom in until I get it to say 4 feet, and then I'm going to click. I actually moved my cursor and made it not 4 feet, but that's okay because I can click on these witnesses and I can move that over 4. So I usually just kind of place them in like this, and that just split it into 2 panes of glass. But if you get that number wrong, you can always just click on it. So this one I'll even place very off, and then I'll make it this 4. And then I'm going to do 8 foot. The 8 foot one will be easier because Revit likes to snap to those nice easy numbers. So because that's right in the middle of our 16 foot tall curtain wall, it's going to be a little bit easier. And then I'm going to hit escape to end the command. And now I'm going to add in my mullions, or those aluminum rails that are going to be sitting in here within these. So that is within the mullion tool in the architecture tab. Now you can place mullions on separate individual grid lines or even the segments of the grid. I 9 times out of 10 use this all grid option because this is going to be the easiest of me clicking on the curtain wall, and it's just going to be applying them on every single edge or every single side. So it makes it a little bit easier to do or manage. Did it not put it on that side? If I go into my level 1 floor plan, it did. It's just kind of sitting in there. This wall, so maybe when I did do that cut and shift, this wall didn't move. There we go. I just used my arrow key and it looks like it shifted over. Let me go back into my 3D view. Okay. Did this mullion not shift over with it? Huh, because that's broken there. See that? I've never seen that happen before. these bottom mullions. You know what? I'm actually gonna, okay, I clicked on make continuous and it seemed to have fixed it. See this one that was also shifted? Make continuous. You know what? I'm actually gonna just delete that wall entirely and redraw it, because it seems like something didn't work out well for it. So I'm gonna go back into the wall tool, level 1, level 2. I'm gonna place my 14-foot curtain wall. All of these others adjusted. I'm going to click on the wall, go into cut, this guy and this guy. I'm going to place a dimension from grid to edge to here to here. Whoops. And then click to place them in line. Lock that one in place. Click on my curtain wall. Click on this measurement, change it to 3 foot. Huh. Interesting. Never seen that happen before. But also, as you guys figured out, I don't like editing. So I'm going to now put in a curtain grid, 4 foot, 8 foot, hit escape, put some mullions in, do all. Okay. Cool. See, mistakes can happen, but they're pretty easy to fix in Revit, which I always have really liked and enjoyed. Okay. Next thing we'll do too is we are going to adjust some of our panels, this one right here and this one here, to be doors. I've already loaded a door in for you. So we had to load a door in for the residential one, but there is one in this template. So again, to switch this panel into a door, can we do it in level 1? I've never done it this way before. So we can just hover over this panel and use our tab key to click on just this panel. I usually do it in the 3D view. So I'm going to hover over the panel I want, and I'm going to just cycle through the tab key until I have this panel highlighted, and then I'm going to click on it. Change my properties from this system panel to a curtain wall glass. Right now it's opening in the opposite way I want it to, so I can just use the space bar to flip it around, or these buttons here too. So I want it to open this way. And I'm going to do the same thing with this panel. I'll go into my 3D view. I'm going to orbit around, hover over the panel, and use my tab key to click on just this panel. Click on my properties bar, switch it to a door, and then go into level 1 and use my arrows to flip it around. I think the floor plan one may be easier because then you have to go back into floor plan anyway to make sure it's facing the right way. But 3D view is usually a little easier to grab the panel itself as an individual. And now would be a great time, even though Revit hasn't prompted me, now would be a great time to click on save. So that way I have a copy of this project. And let's see how long this video has been going. Can I do my windows and stuff? I'll do my windows in this video. So next then, I'm going to go into my level 1 floor plan and place in some of the windows that I have, as well as the doors that I have here. I'm going to have to place a partition wall within here as well. So we'll do that partition wall on level 1 first. So it actually goes up into level 5 because we have that bathroom on either side, or on this side on every level. So I'm going to go into the wall tool. For my wall type, I'm going to scroll up, and we are going to use this interior 7.5 partition wall, which is fire rated for an hour. And we are just going to slap this somewhere in this area. We don't know where just yet, but we'll place some dimensions after the fact. And then we will start putting in some of our windows. So if I go back into my drawings here, and I scroll up to my level 1 floor plan, we have information about where our windows and our doors are placed. So we have 3 windows here, all tagged as window type A. One of them is 6 foot 6 inches down. the next one's 6 foot, and then the next one's 6 foot from there. And that's all of our windows on level 1. On level 2, we have 3 windows sitting back here, 3 windows here, and then another window right here on level 2. We're going to use the default sill height for those windows as well. So let's start with our level 1 windows. And I'll go in to Revit, and I'm going to use the window tool, which is keyboard shortcut WN, or this button right here. And we have not too many windows loaded into our project. We are going to use this custom one that I've kind of loaded in, this awning with trim. So that's going to be the window we use in every scenario we have a window. We'll leave that sill height alone at 2 feet. And I'm just going to place 3 of them here. 1, 2, 3. I don't have them placed necessarily in the right spot just yet, because I'm going to go in with my dimension tool and I'm going to move where they are located. So our first one is, if I hit escape a bunch of times, 6 foot 6 off this grid, and then 6 foot from here to here, 6 foot from here to here. So I'm going to go into the dimension tool, just keyboard shortcut DI, click on the grid to the middle of this window, to the middle of this window, to the middle of this window, and then I'll click out to place these dimensions. Whenever I'm working with chains of dimensions, I always kind of move myself down in the line as I adjust them. So I'll hit escape a couple times to end the window command. I'm going to click on this window, adjust this dimension to be 6 foot 6, enter. Click on this window, adjust this dimension to be 6. Click on this window, adjust this dimension to be 6. So because I moved down in the line, each one of these kind of changed how it was moving them. Because if I click on this window, I have 2 dimensions I can adjust. But if I moved it without kind of moving down the line, I just kind of have to keep going back and forth, and it gets kind of annoying. Next, I'll do my windows on level 2. So if we go back to our drawing and look at level 2, we have the 3 windows up here, the 3 windows over here. We also have a bathroom window. Do we have a bathroom window on level 1? We don't. Kind of weird, but I guess we're not going to have it. And then we have another window sitting over here. So I'm going to go back into Revit. I'm going to go into my level 2 floor plan. So I'm going to double click on it. And then I'm going to go into the window command, which is WN. And I'm just going to place 1, 2, 3, and I'll work on their dimensions after. 1, 2. If you place it inside out, like this one, you can easily just click on that arrow to reverse it. And my Revit's getting a little glitchy at the moment, but that's okay. And then we also have our window down here. And then I will hit escape a bunch of times. And I'm going to now add in their dimensions. So let's just double check them. We've got 4 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 6.5, 6 foot, 6 foot. Dun, dun, dun. So I'm going to go into the dimension tool, which again you could do up here, or keyboard shortcut DI, from the grid to the middle, to the middle, to the middle. Click up to place that dimension chain, hit escape about a trillion billion times, click on the window, click on the dimension, change it, click on the window, click on the dimension, change it, window, dimension, change it. And then over here as well, so I'll do keyboard shortcut DI, from grid to middle, to middle, to middle. I'll click to place, and then I'll hit escape a billion trillion times. I'll click on the window. Sometimes too, you will have to zoom in because that witness will kind of get in the way of the one you're actually trying to change. 6 foot 6, space, or escape rather, excuse me. 6, Sometimes too, when you go to move these, as you're adjusting them, they might start weirdly overlapping each other, but that's okay. We'll hit escape because we do kind of go back and fix it. I forgot to put the window here in the bathroom. And it also looks like I might have forgotten to make that wall go up high enough, but we'll fix that in a second. So I'm going to go back into dimension from this grid to this middle, click to place it. I think this one was 5 and 7 1/4. Yes, I was right. I'll hit escape a bunch of times. I'll click on this window, click on this dimension, 5, 7.25, enter. We have this window here in the bathroom. So I'm going to go back into the window tool, WN, click to place it. And then I'm going to go into my level 1 to see if I mess something up with that wall. I'm going to go into level 1. I'm going to click on this wall. We have a base constraint of level 1. I have a top constraint of, see, I only placed it going up to level 2. I want it to go up to level 5. And so now when I'm in my level 2 plan, it's not, I noticed that it was half-toned, and I don't want that. So now it is, in fact, in the correct plan. For this window here, let's go look to see where this window is placed. So this window is in line with where this door is. So now would be a good time also then to add these doors in. They exist on level 2 as well as level 1. They're in the exact same spot on both of those. We also have a door here that's in line with it. And we also have on the roof too, we have those 2 doors. So let's go into Revit. And we're going to use the door tool, which is keyboard shortcut DR, or the door button here. We are going to use this one that has been loaded in, this hollow metal door. That's what we're going to use for all of these ones. And I'm just going to place a door here, another one here, another one here, too. And you can change which way it flips by where you're hovering over. And then also the space bar can adjust the way it opens, which we actually don't want this one. I'm on level 2. So let me hit escape, click on this guy and delete him because I don't want him in this one. Let me go into my level 1 plan, start the door command again, which is keyboard shortcut DR. I'll place a door here, another one here. Since this is level 1, I do want that fire escape door. And I know they're not in line right now, but that's okay. We'll move them to be in line. And level 3, so I double click on level 3. I'm going to start the door tool and a door here and here, and then we will move everything into place in just a moment. So when we're looking at the measurements of where these doors are placed, we zoom in. So from the face of the frame, the inside face of that core, to the center of this door is 5 and 7 1/4. Then from the center of this door to the center of our partition is 19 and 10 1/2. From this center to the center of this door is 2 foot, 5 3/4. So I'll go into Revit. I'm currently in my level 1 floor plan. And so I'm going to start the dimension tool, which I did DR, not DI, which is DI or this button here. And I'm going to go from this grid, but I can even just click up here on the grid. If I wanted the core of the wall though, and let's say there's not a grid there, again, I can hover over it and use the tab key to click on it to the center of this door, to the center of this partition, to the center of this door, and then I'm going to click to place it. To move everything around then, I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to click on this door, and I'm going to adjust this measurement to be 5 7 1/4. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Enter. Then I'm going to click on this partition wall, click on this measurement, 19, 10 and a half. And then I'm going to click on this door and change this measurement to 2 foot 5 3/4. Enter. Now that I have these ones in place, I'm going to use the align tool to align this door and this one. So again, that's keyboard shortcut AL or this graph button up here. And I'll click the center of this door, the center of this door, and it's going to shift that one over. I'm going to go into my level 2 floor plan, and I'm going to adjust my doors in the exact same way. So I'm going to go into the dimension tool, which is keyboard shortcut DI, or that button up there. From this grid to the middle, to the middle, to here, click to place. When I change this door, this should automatically change to 19 feet, 10 and a half. If it doesn't, I'm in big trouble because this wall is going from level 1 to level 2. I'll hit escape a bunch of times to end the command. I'll click on this door, click the measurement. It was 5 foot 7 1/4. I'm 99% sure. And then this one already adjusted to be the right size. And so I'll click on this door then, and I'll adjust this one to be 2 foot space 5 3/4. I'll hit the align tool up here, or again, keyboard shortcut AL to make this door and this window match up. And then I'll go into my level 3 floor plan and I'll place the same measurements here. So dimension, so click up here or keyboard shortcut DI from the grid to this door, to that partition, to this door, click to place, hit escape a bunch of times. We'll click on this door and it was 5 7 1/4. I hope I was right. I hope I wasn't making that up. Because otherwise I'm going to have to change all these. Click on this, want door, and it was 2 5 3/4. So let me just double check. Okay, I had the right measurement. That's a relief. And if I go look at my building 3D, we haven't looked at the building 3D in a while, we can see that pretty much a lot of the whole building has been kind of taken care of for us. We still have some floors that we've got to put in, and then some framing details as well that we have to put in. We'll come back to the wall tool because we need to put in that knee height wall, but without our columns and everything, putting that in at the moment is going to be seeming a little silly. And so this is where I think, though, I'm going to leave off with this project in this video.